reading.
Okay. Hello, Manchester. Welcome to Ward 13. I have Mike Lopez with me today, who, well, you weren't alderman from Ward 10, but you are from Ward 10.
No, I was alderman at large.
Alderman at large for many years.
For many years.
So you were one of my aldermen.
Absolutely.
But, I know Tammy Simmons back in Ward 10 gets mad when I say, welcome to Ward 10. No, we're in Ward 13. And today the first day that this is going to air is July 3rd. And I have a story for you. And it climaxes on July 3rd, 1754. So I'm going to take you back in time. The year is 1754. On May 28th in western Pennsylvania, an area contested by the British and French, a company of colonial militia from Virginia, some 40 in number, accompanied by a dozen Native Americans from the Mingo tribe, encountered a force of 35 French soldiers and French Canadians under the command of Ensign Joseph Coulon de Villiers de Jumonville. I hope I got that right, growing up in Ward 10.
You pronounced it better than I could.
That encounter would change history in ways then unimaginable. The Virginia militiamen were led by a 22-year-old lieutenant colonel who at 6 foot 2 inches tall was a giant for the time and would later become famous for his physical stamina in battle and calmness under fire. The young lieutenant colonel was a member of Virginia's aristocratic planter class. Although his family was of the second rank socially in those class-conscious times and in that class-conscious colony, quite unlike our colony of New Hampshire, where the Puritans were more egalitarian. The young colonel, lieutenant colonel's half-brother, had married into the powerful Fairfax family, whose patriarch mentored the future soldier, setting him up as a land surveyor at the age of 17. The young lieutenant colonel's own father had died when he was 11, which had closed off the possibility of his receiving the higher education that was typical for a gentleman of his class. Military service was to be the vehicle by which he would rise in the world. In the spring of 1754, the young lieutenant colonel's mission was to protect a fort being built by the Ohio Company, of which his half-brother was a shareholder, and which was competing with other English colonial land speculators to control the bonanza of land in what was the Ohio River Valley. 4 months earlier, brevetted a major of the Virginia militia, the young man had journeyed to the same area and delivered a summons, a demand by the English, to the French forces, asking them to abandon the disputed territory. The summons was ignored. It was the young officer, the former surveyor, who, reconnoitering the area, came up with the idea for the site of the as yet unfinished fort. That location is present-day Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. A French-Canadian force had driven off the construction crew and commenced to build their own fort in the site. On May 23rd, the local French commander had sent Ensign Joseph Coulon de Villiers de Jumonville, like our young Virginian, an aristocrat, with a force of 35 soldiers to find out whether an English force was in the area and to deliver a summons similar to the one our young Virginian had delivered to the French, ordering them out and warning against further encroachments on territory claimed by the French king. The young Virginian's own knowledge of the woods paled in comparison of what the leader of his Indian allies knew. The Mingo warriors were led by Tanacharison. It was Tanacharison who had found the French camp, and on the morning of May 28th, the joint force of Mingos and Virginians took up positions behind rocks around the Canadian camp. Some of the French Canadians were making breakfast, others were still asleep. Details about what actually happened vary, but it's generally assumed one of the Canadians fired a shot, and the Virginia militiamen, obeying the orders of their commander, answered with at least 2 volleys of musket fire. The Canadians who weren't killed or severely wounded by gunfire tried to escape, only to be cut off by Tanacharison's Indians. The battle lasted 15 minutes, from the first shot to Ensign Jumonville's capitulation. The French and Canadians surrendered their firearms while Jumonville delivered his summons to the Virginia militia leader, ordering the English to abandon the area. The militia area, not being as well educated as the contemporaries of his class, couldn't read French. And as he and his interpreter struggled with the summons, Tanacarisan split open Ensign Jumonville's skull with his tomahawk, and according to a contemporary account, washed his hands with his brains and then scalped him. The murder was a ritual sacrifice showing Tanacarisan's contempt for the representative of his former overlord, the French. The other Mingos then killed the wounded and scalped the dead. What had been an honorable victory for the young Virginian had turned into a massacre. 13 or 14 of the French force were killed in all, and all were left unburied in shallow graves later found by the French, after the Virginia militia retreated to an area in the rear called the Great Meadows. The young Virginia militia leader would later write a letter to his other brother, Jack, about the battle, in which he said, "I can with truth assure you, I heard bullets whistle, and believe me, there was something charming in the sound." In his later career as a military officer, which took him to heights few men have ever reached, he wasn't so flippant about war. And you have it there, but I'm sure you could have figured out who that young Virginian was.
George Washington.
And that battle is now called the Battle of Jumonville. George Washington retreated to a defensive position in the rear in an area called the Great Meadows and started building a crude fort, which he called Fort Necessity. Upon hearing of the loss of Jumonville's force, 600 French, Canadian, and Indian soldiers under the command of Jumonville's brother, Louis Coulon de Villiers, he'd actually asked for the command to avenge his brother, went after George Washington and his men. On July 3rd, the day, I think it's 263 years ago to when this show will be first airing. On July 3rd, the French-Canadian force captured Fort Necessity in the Battle of the Great Meadows, forcing Washington to negotiate a withdrawal under arms. When you withdraw under arms, you're being allowed to surrender with dignity because you've shown that you're worthy of respect. And Coulon de Villiers, despite feeling that Washington had murdered his brother, did allow him the dignity to leave under arms. That meant you could take your muskets, your weapons, and perhaps one cannon and your goods and leave. And then you were on parole. You promised not to fight for a year or 18 months. Those were the European rules, which in the woods would later not serve the Europeans so well.
Gentleman's war.
A gentleman's war. As part of the surrender, Washington signed a capitulation document written in French, a document he didn't understand, or which had been poorly translated for him. The document claimed that Jumonville and his men were assassinated, that Washington had ordered their murder. The French later would use the document as propaganda in their geopolitical struggles with the English, as they sought to justify what would become the First World War in history. For the Battle of Jumonville Glen was the opening battle of the French and Indian War, which was known as the 7 Years' War in Europe. This was a world war as it was fought in North Africa, the Caribbean, continental Europe, Africa, India, in the Indian subcontinent, and the Philippines. Such is history made, Mike, because without the French and Indian War, the British won Canada. They won Canada, and they won this great empire. And then, like any hierarchical organization, and we've both been in the hierarchical organization known as the Army, a hierarchical organization demands conformity. Now, demanding conformity out of the colonists, particularly the New Englanders, proved quite troublesome. And what happens is, on July 4th, 1776, the 13 colonies declared their independence. So ironically, I didn't know this about George Washington until I started reading a book about the French and Indian War just a few days ago. And just to think, George Washington was part of the first battle of a world war that changed history. We know he's an incredible man, but...
Well, you know, people like yourself digging up this information. I'm not a historian as far as I go to John Mongan or John Clayton, who helped me with putting all the squares in the city of Manchester, you know. I mean, these are the people that, I mean, you got to really like that, and it takes a lot of research for it. And it's a long time ago, 1700s, you know.
I know,
Yeah.
but it impacts us to this very day. It's
Absolutely.
interesting, when I was reading into the book, the British wanted to, both the British and I probably lost myself a few votes in Ward 10, huh? Even though my name is John Claude Hopwood and I'm part French Canadian. Please, if I ever run again, remember that.
Well, you pronounce the words very good.
You'd think that growing up in a French-speaking neighborhood, I'd have a little more facility with the language, though. But it's amazing that one of the things that Washington encountered, and I think it's strange how the past will mirror the future or the present. They had Montcalm, who was one of a great general himself, and Montcalm met his end at the Battle of the Plains of Abraham in 1759, I believe, against James Wolfe, and that changed history because that's when France effectively lost Canada, and Montcalm was another one who wanted to fight in European formation. They actually abhorred what would be, when we were brought up, Indians, Native Americans, or they're called First Nations in Canada, the Aboriginal people, knew the woods, and they knew how to fight, and they gave no quarter at all. Now, Washington was quite shocked by what he was 22 years old, by what he saw, because he'd been brought up in the European tradition. But I know you're a Vietnam War vet, and your generals had been trained in a different war, World War II.
Well, World War II, you had great generals, and even in Vietnam, you had good generals, you know.
But the tactics to fight a European war then and fighting a war in a jungle in Vietnam were quite different.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you got a big open field.
Right.
You know, one side, that's it. You go to jungles of Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan, it's a little different.
Right. I always remember when we fought the Persian Gulf War, I just missed that. They were going to recall me if it had turned. Remember, it was supposed to be a bloodbath, but our own John Sununu had the great idea of bribing the Revolutionary Guard, and they did. This is a part of history that people really don't talk about. Some of the crack units that were facing, like, I think it was 5th Corps, because my corps, 7th Corps, was on the left. And they did the wheeling motion. And they bribed them just to drop out. And a lot of them wound up in Michigan, which has an Arab community. And, you know, they were offered welfare and all sorts of benefits to get them started in America. And they took the deal. So I think the spearhead of the 5th Corps managed to get through. 'Cause I remember people were really worried about that.
Well, let's talk about the good thing for the 4th of July.
Okay, the
right
4th of
now.
July.
I mean, we get into wars, we can talk Veterans Day and Memorial Day and stuff like that.
But
the
it's
4th of July,
interesting.
what it means to us.
What does it mean to us? The whole thing is these people that are now that came, like the Revolutionary Guard, I've met them in Michigan, they're Americans now, and they celebrate the 4th of July. The one thing about the French and Indian War was that, as we look at it now, it was a multicultural war. French, the Native Americans, all the different nations. And it created, its aftermath was creating the country that we celebrate on the 4th of July.
Yeah. Years ago, there used to be a lot of celebration on the 4th of July. In Manchester, the celebration is usually on the 3rd. It'll be tomorrow night, actually,
Right.
when this program airs. The fireworks will be going off at 9 o'clock, I believe.
I think I'm at 9 a.m. They switched me
9
around
a.m.
today.
Oh, well, tomorrow, then you're
By the
9.
time most people watch us will be Sunday at 9 p.m. after Joe Kelly Lavassa's show.
Okay, so.
There'll be a different type of fireworks probably, you know.
Years ago, a long time ago,
Yeah.
they're still having some communities, they do have parades on the 4th of July. A lot of small towns have that type of function going on, and barbecues and all that. But the 4th of July is do whatever you want to do. That's the freedom that's been given to us.
Right.
Enjoy yourself. Be cautious and watch around you what's going on. Of course, like Homeland Security has indicated today that
Oh, really?
everybody's got to be watching what's going on. You never know when you have the lone wolf coming in, so to speak, and want to upset everything. So we hope none of that happens. But I'm sure the law enforcement and the Army and everybody else is prepared for it one way or the other, because even in Washington, D.C., they're going to have a big ceremony down there and concert, and Boston Pops are going to be. So it's a big thing, and that's what it's all about. Just relax and celebrate, and thank everybody for the freedom that we have in this country.
Right, because we originally, when I was thinking we were going to talk about veterans issues, but July 4th is more than that. It's about our national identity.
Well, it's how we got here.
Right.
I mean, but it's our national identity, our freedom. It's that flag. I mean, you and I took an oath that we'd give our life to it.
Oh, yes.
And many other people have done the same thing. So that's why we're free today, because of people that went and sacrificed. And even in Manchester, we have the different squares we have in the city of Manchester. After the first person that died, Sweeney Post in World War I.
Right, which we both belong to Sweeney
Yeah,
Post.
so all these things, and then when you look back, I was looking back at history. 30 years ago is when we named Merrimack Common to the veterans.
Really?
Yes, 30 years ago, November 11th, 30 years ago, we named Merrimack Common. Used to be a fire brigade that would have a pond in it years back, and have a pond in there, and they used to do a fire muster and shoot the water over the flagpole.
Geez, I can't remember even that.
But what I don't read is history. It was Merrimack Common. There used to be a parking lot in Merrimack Common.
Oh, that's right.
And back in the 1980s, when I was on the Parks and Recreation Commission, that asked the Board of Mayor and Aldermen through the commission and everything, because the time element was running out.
That's right, there
And
was.
So we got rid of the parking lot and made it a complete Veterans Memorial Park.
Didn't Rene Gagnon, who was on Iwo Jima, wasn't he the
Ray
person that he was at the parking lot collecting tolls at one time? I think he had a job for a while.
And
Rene
there's
Gagnon.
somebody mentioned that a long time ago.
Right.
I'm not positive though.
I was in the
I'd have to ask.
I was in the 7th grade when we heard that. So that'd be about
Ubik
72 or
McDonough,
3.
he would know, because he was the one. Ubik
Right.
McDonough was the one that came forward and asked, but he was the lead person in building the Gagnon Memorial
Right.
at Victory Park. So there's a lot of history and a lot of veterans, and there's a time for people to go to reflect on that. But today, you can reflect upon how we got there. This is our freedom. This is our do what we want to do, relax, have a barbecue, sit home, whatever. It doesn't make a difference, and they'll be reminiscing, I'm sure. A lot of veterans will reminisce, and when things like the Boston Pops brings me, I like to watch the Boston Pops.
I still remember Arthur Fiedler. I remember I went to school at Boston University. It's amazing, that ellipse, how many people they can fit into that ellipse. I remember there was like 250,000 people, and the 4th of July in the ellipse, something I can never forget.
Well, you maybe I know years ago I was on back in the '80s when we had the fireworks for the city of Manchester at Deerfield Park,
Right.
and Clem Lemire and they wanted to move it, and there was a big uproar about moving it. And the reason we wanted to move it to Arms Park, it was bigger and better, and of course it was bringing lawn chairs the same way at Deerfield Park, but we had too many complaints in the neighborhood of people afterwards tramping on their people's lawns, going to their cars, and the people laying on the blankets, and a lot of kids in the area, and some inappropriate things were going on where it just got too much up there, and so we did move it to Arms Park, and like I said, it was an uproar. Every time you want to change something, there's always an uproar.
Oh, well, I remember as a kid, Derryfield Park, on the blanket.
Yeah, Deerfield Park.
And they hadn't built everything that was there. I don't even think Hillside was there when I was really small. Is that Hillside that's at Derryfield Park?
Yeah, Hillside.
Okay. And, man, and then the fireworks. And then, remember, for some years, they wouldn't let us have fireworks. There's like a moratorium on fireworks.
But a lot of people, it's like tomorrow night we're having the fireworks in Manchester. You will find, you go to Deerfield Park and you will find, I don't know, hundreds of people, maybe 1,000 people up there. You can see a great view
Yeah.
of the entire city. And you go to West Memorial Field, and people are sitting in the bleachers watching it. It really packs
You know,
up.
I never thought of sitting there.
Oh,
I have my
absolutely.
place. I'm not going to tell anybody because to get a place to really watch them.
Oh, yeah.
I have a place where I go to. I never thought of watching it at West.
Well, there was a good place down around Coca-Cola down by
Yeah.
the river. It used to be. Now it's Planet
Coca-Cola.
Fitness. So, there's always a good place to it. A lot of people go on the bridge now and watch it. So it's wherever they're comfortable for. It's really good.
Now, you claim you're not a historian, but when we were talking, you told me the first 4th of July was actually celebrated on July 8th.
Yeah, we celebrated July 8th after signing a Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
And there was a little history about July 2nd when they were signing it.
Oh, so it was actually signed, and then they just dated it like
Yeah,
the 4th.
they just dated the 4th, and the 4th of July was a celebration, but because of some arguments in between the colonies, that they decided to do it on the 8th, the first one.
So some things never change.
Well, it's you had to get the document signed before you do anything. So,
It's like World War II. We celebrate May 8th, but because Stalin was Joe Stalin, they celebrated on May 9th.
but the history, who was it? The two presidents that died on July?
John Adams and Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson.
They both died on the 50th anniversary.
50th anniversary, they both died.
Yeah, on July 4th, 1826. And one of them said it, either Adams or Jefferson. Now only Adams is left, not knowing that he had already died.
Mm.
The funny thing is, they were the two people. Jefferson, I think, was the primary person that wrote the Declaration of Independence. And then they were allies, but then they had a falling out. One being a Federalist, and Jefferson more.
Well, he wrote that document. You're a writer,
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite a document that a young man like that wrote.
Yeah, it's remarkable the genius of Thomas Jefferson.
Right.
He was like a Renaissance man, architect, inventor. But that generation of our founding fathers and the founding mothers too were rather unique people.
Mm.
And but they had gone through this war, the French and Indian War, the dynastic battles, and after the war, the Revolutionary War, there'd be wars to come.
Oh,
War
yeah.
of 1812.
Yeah, there's no end to it, huh?
No, there really isn't.
So,
We got about 4 minutes of Mike. Is there anything on your
well,
mind?
I think that I like to just wish everybody a good, safe holiday and enjoy yourself. And remember, no cell phones when you're driving.
Yes, I used my cell phone the other day,
Yeah.
not remembering.
Yeah,
Well, it's
it's-
July 2nd, right? Today. So on July 1st, we can no longer text.
No
or-
longer text, and you can't look down, and you can't be. Your car is running and on a highway, according to what the chief of police said, is that just because you're parked at a stoplight, it doesn't give you the right to use it.
Yeah,
So-
I only got my.
But it's good. It's good. It's good for everybody. I think. It's safer holiday than before.
There's always a balance between freedom and responsibility.
Well, that's true. That's very true. And I think that as you look around Manchester, and there's like I said, a celebration as ours on the 3rd. It used to be, I know every 4th of July somebody asks me about a parade, and I said, well, years ago we used to do it, but a long time ago, and it just doesn't work out now. People are too busy, too much
Right.
going on, It's
And you
like
have
Gill-
your 3-day
like-
weekend.
Yeah, it's like Gill Stadium have a ball game over there, and how many people are going to go to a ball game? It used to be filled up years ago, but hey, things change, and it's electronic time now,
Oh,
So,
yeah.
unfortunately, and I do want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July. Enjoy yourself, no matter what you do, laying in the sun, barbecuing, or just watching TV and just reminisce of maybe how we got there or how you got there and your background and think about those that are protecting us and out there in Iraq and Afghanistan and our Air Force that's out there protecting our shorelines. There's a lot out there. You being a former Army intelligent, you know what's out there.
Oh, I do.
So, you know, we
And,
got a lot of protection out there. So just enjoy yourself and just watch out for any unusual things and let the police know what's going on.
Mike, we have about a minute and a half left. What's your idea about the future of Manchester and New Hampshire?
Well, the future of Manchester, New Hampshire is at a standstill. I think that you have to look at working more together in a
Yes.
positive, not a negative way. I think that's important. You know, you can't have everything you want in life. You got to compromise. I think that I learned that through watching some of the experts that used to be on the board of Marin Alderman. I was looking at my book in 1985, and everybody's gone now. And these are people that you could talk to, and you can compromise with them. If you get 50% of the cake, you know, you can't be arguing about the other 50%. Things got to move forward. It was like the Civic Center,
Right.
same thing. You know, so I think Manchester, it will survive as long as we work in a positive way.
That we need to cooperate, just like the 13 colonies
You gotta
had to learn to cooperate
Yep.
in the War of Independence.
Nothing is ever perfect, and you have too many people trying to look for that perfect solution. There is no perfect solution. If there was a perfect solution, we wouldn't have any wars.
Right.
So,
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mike,
Okay.
for coming on, and hope to have you on again in the future.
okay, thank you very much,
And thank you,
and
Manchester.
happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July.